The frost was on the inside of the window when I woke up that first morning, and I lay there counting my own breath in little white clouds. I had $11 in my checking account and no address to put on a job application. But 3 winters later, I was warm, I was dry, and I owned the roof over my head free and clear. This is not a story I made up to make you feel something. This is exactly what I lived, and exactly how I climbed out, one salvaged object at a time. By the end of this, I am going to hand you the single cheapest thing I ever built. A heater I made from a rusted metal barrel and a handful of bricks that cost me under $20 and kept a whole room at 68 degrees on a night that hit 9 below. And I am telling you right now, before you talk yourself out of listening, that I did this with no land, no savings, and no permission from anybody. If you have almost nothing, this was built for you. So let me start where it really started, on the day I stopped believing what I had been told. I want you to understand something about that first morning. The frost inside the glass was not on a house window. It was on the window of a car, a 1998 sedan with 190,000 miles on it, and I was living in it in a grocery store parking lot because it was lit all night and I felt safer where there were cameras. I had done everything the right way. I had called the shelters. I had sat on hold. I had shown up when they told me to show up. And what I learned is that the story we get told about help is not the story that is actually waiting for you when you fall. They told me there was a bed. Then they told me the bed was for families only, and it was just me. Then they told me the family beds were full, and the wait list was long, and could I call back Monday? I want to give you a real number, because the number is what finally broke something open in my head. In a lot of American cities, the wait for subsidized housing is not weeks. It is years. In some places, the housing voucher waitlist runs 3 to 5 years long, and in a few of the biggest cities, people have waited 8. Some lists are closed completely, meaning you cannot even get your name on the paper. I sat in that car and did the math. I was 46 years old. If I waited the way they told me to wait, I could be over 50 before a door opened, and I might freeze before then. That was the moment, not a dramatic one. Just a quiet click in my chest that said, nobody is coming, so you are going to have to be the one who comes. And here is the part that still makes me angry, and I am going to let it make you angry too, because it should. While I was being told there was nothing, there was a whole economy running on people like me staying stuck. Storage unit companies making money on the stuff people can't fit in a shrinking life. Payday lenders on every corner near the shelters. Weekly motels charging me $65 a night, which is nearly $2,000 a month, more than a mortgage, for a room with a stain on the ceiling. I paid that motel rate for 9 nights before I understood the trap. They keep you paying by the night so you can never save the deposit to escape by the month. The system is not broken. It is working exactly how it was built, so I stopped feeding it. I took the last money I had and I made a decision that everyone in my life thought was crazy. I decided that if no one would rent me 4 walls, I would build my own. But I had no idea how, and I had almost nothing to build with. That was the next mountain. Let me tell you how I found the thing that changed everything, because it was not glamorous and it did not look like a home. It looked like junk. I had started reading everything I could at the public library, because the library was warm and it was free and nobody asks you why you were there. I was reading forums where people lived in vans and buses and sheds, and one line from a stranger stuck in my head like a splinter. He wrote that the mistake most people make is they chase a vehicle when what they actually need is a box that does not move. That flipped my whole plan. A van needs insurance, registration, a working engine, gas. A box does not. So I started looking for a box, and I found it on a free classifieds page at 11 at night. An old cargo trailer, 16 feet long, 7 feet wide, the kind you tow behind a truck to move furniture. The floor was solid, but the axle was shot, so it could never legally go on a highway again. The man wanted it gone off his property. I offered him $200, which was most of what I had, and I asked if he would hold it for a week while I figured out how to move it. He looked at me the way people had been looking at me for months, that flat look that says you are not going to follow through. That look used to make me want to disappear. That day, it made me want to prove him wrong. I paid a guy with a flatbed $40 to haul it 11 miles to a piece of land I had arranged to sit on. I will tell you about the land in a minute, because that is the part everyone thinks is impossible, and it is not. So now I owned a 16-foot metal box on a dead axle for $200. And the first night I slept in it, I understood the real enemy I was fighting. It was not the rain. The metal skin kept the rain out fine. It was the cold. A bare metal box is worse than a car because metal pulls the heat straight out of your body. I woke up that first night colder than I had ever been in the sedan, my sleeping bag damp with my own breath, my fingers so stiff I could not work the zipper. I almost quit right there. I sat in that freezing metal box at 2 in the morning and I cried, the ugly kind, and I thought maybe everyone was right about me, but then I got mad again. And getting mad is what saved me, because it sent me back to the library to solve the one problem that could kill me. How do you make a metal box warm when you have no money? The answer turned out to be the most important thing I learned in 3 years, and it is the thing I most want you to have. Here is the truth nobody selling you off-grid dreams will say plainly. You do not fight cold with heat first. You fight cold with insulation first, because heat you have to keep buying, and insulation you buy once. I learned that the enemy is not just cold air, it is 3 separate things. Air leaks, where the cold sneaks in through gaps. Conduction, where heat drains out through the metal touching the outside. And your own breath, which turns to water on cold metal and soaks everything you own. I attacked all 3 with the cheapest materials I could find, and I want to give you the exact list, because this is the part you can copy. For the gaps, I bought 2 tubes of cheap silicone caulk for $8, and I sealed every seam and rivet I could reach. One afternoon of work, the wind stopped whistling that same night. For the conduction, I needed to stop my body heat from touching the metal, and this is where I found the material that carried me through 3 winters. Reflective bubble insulation, the kind that looks like bubble wrap with foil on both sides. People in the trades call it by a brand name, but the store version is cheaper. I bought a roll, 100 square feet, for about $45, and I lined every wall and the ceiling with it, foil facing inward to bounce my heat back at me. The difference was not small. The difference was the whole thing. That reflective layer traps a pocket of still air, and still air is one of the best insulators on Earth, which is why animals fluff their fur and why your grandmother put newspaper in her coat. But I was not done, because a single layer was not enough for a real winter, and I still had almost no money left. So let me stop here and talk directly to you, the person listening who is thinking this could never be me. I have no money, no truck, no land, no strong back, no idea where to start. I want you to hear me, because I was you, sitting in a lit parking lot with $11. And this next part is the part I built for exactly the person you are right now. You do not need a trailer to start. You need to start with the layer, because the layer is the skill, and the skill works on anything. It works on a car you are sleeping in tonight. It works on a shed. It works on one cold room in a house you can barely afford to heat. Here's what you can do this week for less than the cost of one restaurant meal. Go to any hardware store and buy 1 roll of reflective bubble insulation, or if even that is too much, buy a stack of the cheapest emergency Mylar blankets, the ones that cost $1 or 2 each in the camping aisle. Tape them to your windows at night, shiny side in. That alone can cut the heat pouring out of a single pane window by a real, measurable amount, and people have kept themselves from freezing in cars doing exactly this. Then buy 1 roll of that clear window shrink film, the kind you put up with a hairdryer. It runs about $15 and covers several windows. It creates a dead air pocket over the glass, poor man's double glazing, and it is the single highest value thing a broke person can do against the cold. And save your bubble wrap. Every package that comes with bubble wrap, you keep it, because bubble wrap taped over a window, bubbles against the glass, sprayed with a little water to stick, traps that same pocket of still air for free. None of that requires land. None of it requires a landlord's permission. None of it requires you to be strong or handy. It requires you to decide that keeping your own body warm is a thing you are allowed to fight for, and you are. That is the whole secret the people who profit from your cold do not want you to feel. If you want every technique I used laid out step by step, the insulation layers, the land arrangements, the barrel heater, the water system, all of it in one place. I wrote it all down in a book called Built from Nothing, and it is also part of the first Shelter and Build Deeper guides I put together for people who are exactly where I was. The whole thing is $97, and it is waiting for you in the description at shelterfromnothing.com. I did not write it to sell you a dream. I wrote it because I needed it to exist when I was sitting in that parking lot, and it did not. Now it does. Now let me come back to my metal box, because I still had a wet problem, and the wet almost beat me worse than the cold. Every night my breath was fogging up and soaking into everything. Wet insulation stops insulating, wet bedding steals your heat. Mold started creeping in the corners, black and fuzzy, and I knew mold could make me sick enough to end all of it. The word I did not know yet was condensation, and beating it did not cost money, it cost understanding. Warm, wet air hits cold metal and turns to water, the same way a cold glass of tea sweats in summer. So I needed two things. I needed a tiny gap of air behind my insulation so the metal could stay separate from the warm side, and I needed to let a little moisture escape instead of trapping it all inside. I cracked a small roof vent, just barely, even on the coldest nights, which felt insane but worked. And over my reflective layer, I added a second layer that I got almost entirely for free, and this is the one that surprised me most. Wool blankets, old ones, moving blankets, thrift store wool, army surplus. I found out that wool is the one material that still keeps you warm when it is damp, which is exactly why sailors and shepherds have trusted it for hundreds of years. A wool moving blanket at the surplus store cost me between $8 and $12. I hung them over the reflective layer on every wall, and I stuffed the thin gaps around my little door with them. The night I finished the wool layer, I slept without my hat for the first time. I woke up and there was no frost inside, and the corners were dry, and I lay there and I did not want to get up, not because I was depressed, but because for the first time in a year I was comfortable. But comfort is not the same as safe, and I still had two problems that could have killed me. I had no heat source I could trust, and I still have not told you how a woman with no money got a piece of land to put a trailer on. Because that is the question you are all really asking, and it is the one the internet lies about the most. Let me tell you the truth about the land, because it is not what you think. I did not buy land. For a long time, I could not have bought a parking space. What I did instead is the thing almost nobody talks about, and it is completely legal and it is everywhere if you know how to ask. I traded presents for permission. There are people all over this country who own land they cannot fully watch. Older folks on big rural lots, small farmers who have had things stolen out of a backfield, people with a second property sitting empty who worry about it every night. What they want is not rent. What they want is for someone trustworthy to be there. I put up a plain, honest note at 3 feed stores and 2 rural churches. I did not beg. I offered a fair trade. I wrote that I was a quiet, sober, hard-working woman who would keep an eye on a property, keep the weeds down, and be a set of eyes at night. In exchange for a small corner to place a self-contained trailer, I got no answers for 2 weeks. I got one answer in the 3rd week, and one answer was all I needed. He was a widower in his 70s with 40 acres and a bad hip, and thieves had taken the copper wire out of his empty barn twice. He did not want my money. He wanted to stop lying awake. I moved my trailer to the back edge of his property near a tree line, out of sight of the road, and the arrangement that started as a favor turned into 3 years and a friendship I still have. I want to be honest that this takes courage, and it takes references, and it takes you being genuinely trustworthy, because you are asking someone to believe in you when the whole world taught them to be suspicious. But land sharing, caretaking, and what some people call rent-free land in exchange for labor is real. It is common in rural areas, and it costs you nothing but the nerve to ask plainly. So now I had my dry, insulated box on borrowed land, and I had one enemy left: the deep cold, the nights that go below zero, when insulation alone is not enough and a body needs actual heat. And this is where the money question got dangerous, because heat is where broke people die. I could not afford to run a propane heater all night, and the little propane heaters scared me anyway, because they give off water vapor, and worse, they can give off a gas you cannot see or smell that kills you in your sleep. Every winter, the news carries stories of people found gone in a closed space with a fuel heater. I was not going to become one of them. I priced a real wood stove, a small one made for tiny spaces, and the cheapest safe one I found was over $300, plus the pipe, plus the parts to put it through the wall. I did not have $300. I had, at that point, about 60. I spent 2 weeks thinking I had hit the wall I could not climb. I had beaten the wet, I had beaten the wind, I had a home, and I was still going to be cold in January because heat cost more than I had. And then, deep in a homesteading forum at 1 in the morning, a woman answered a question someone else had asked, and her answer changed my third winter completely. She said, "Stop trying to buy a stove that burns a lot of wood. Build the thing that burns almost none." That was the first time I ever read the words rocket mass heater, and that is the secret I promised you at the very beginning. So let me give it to you completely, because this is the top of the whole climb, and it is the cheapest, strangest, most powerful thing I ever built. A rocket mass heater is not a fancy machine. It is an idea, and the idea is old. You burn a small amount of wood, fed straight down into a short, vertical tube, and instead of the fire lazily smoldering, it burns sideways and roars, sucking its own flame into an insulated burn tunnel so hot that it burns nearly all the smoke away. That fierce little fire heats a metal barrel, and the barrel radiates heat into the room fast. Here is the number that made me sit up in that library chair. A proper rocket mass heater can burn around 80 to 90% less wood than a normal stove to put out the same warmth, because it wrings almost every bit of heat out of the fire instead of sending it up the chimney. People heat entire small cabins on nothing but fallen branches and scrap wood they gather for free, and the parts, I want to tell you exactly what it cost me, because you will not believe it. The body was a metal barrel I got for free behind a farm supply, the kind that had held food-grade oil. The burn tunnel I built from fire bricks, and I needed only a handful, which ran me about $2 a brick. I used an old metal duct and a 5-gallon bucket of clay and sand I dug myself for the parts that hold and store the heat. My total out of pocket for the entire heater was under $20. I built it low and simple, following the drawings that people share freely online, and I was terrified the first time I lit it, because I am not a builder and I was playing with fire inside a metal box that was my only home. I fed in 3 sticks, no thicker than my wrist, and that little tube did not smolder. It roared, a sound like a soft jet, pulling the flame down and sideways, and within 20 minutes, the barrel was too hot to touch and the whole trailer was warming from one end. That night, it hit 9 below outside. I know because I had a little thermometer suction cupped to the window, and inside, with 3 sticks of scrap wood and that homemade barrel, I sat in a t-shirt at 68 degrees. I cried again that night, but it was the other kind of crying, the kind that comes out when a fear you have carried for years finally lets go of your chest. The best part is the mass, the clay and sand part, because after the fire burns out, all that stored heat keeps radiating for hours. I would run the fire for an hour in the evening, and the warmth would carry me deep into the night. I was gathering my fuel for free off the ground of a 40-acre property, so my heating bill for that whole third winter, the coldest one, was $0. Let me be clear and responsible, because I care about you actually surviving and not just feeling inspired. Any fire inside a small space needs a real chimney to the outside, needs fresh air to breathe, and needs a carbon monoxide alarm, which costs about $15 and is the best $15 a person living off-grid will ever spend. I had 2 of them. You build this carefully, you build it by the shared plans, and you respect it. But you can build it. A broke woman with no training built it from a free barrel and $20 of brick, and it held. That is the thing I most needed you to hear. It held. 3 years after the frost on that car window, I was sitting warm in a home I built for a total of a few $100s, on land that cost me nothing but my word, heated by a barrel I pulled out of the trash. And the shelters that told me to wait 3 to 5 years, I would have still been on the list. I would have still been waiting for a door that a system profits from keeping shut. So here is what I know now that I did not know, sitting in that parking lot with $11 and everyone's low opinion of me. You are not waiting on a home. You are one salvaged object, one honest note on a feed store wall, one roll of reflective insulation away from starting. Dignity is not something they hand you off a list. It is something you build with your own cold hands, one rung at a time, until you look up and realize you climbed all the way out. If you are the kind of person who refuses to sit quietly on a wait list while someone profits off telling you to wait, then you already have the only thing this really takes, and that is the decision to be the one who comes and saves you. Now, I want to hear from you, because this older, wiser crowd never speaks up unless I ask, so I am asking you straight. Tell me in the comments what you would build first. Would you start with the window film tonight, or would you go looking for your own free barrel to build that heater? And tell me where you are watching from, because I want to know how cold it gets where you are, so I know who I am building these for. Leave that comment. It takes 10 seconds, and it tells me you are out there. And if you believe, like I do, that a home can be rebuilt from almost nothing, then come stand with the rest of us who are doing it. Subscribe and stay, because this is a place for people reclaiming their dignity, one salvage thing at a time. Next time, I am going to show you how I got clean running water and a real hot shower in that trailer for under $30, with no well, no plumbing, and no monthly bill. That one surprised me more than the heater did. Stay warm. Keep climbing. I will see you at the next rung. I'm going to stop right there, but this is where the real work begins. Inside the shelter builders, I pick up exactly where this video left off, walking you through the barrel heater's complete build and safety setup. Get stuck? Ask me directly, I answer you myself, no robots. You won't be doing this alone. Just point your phone camera at the code on your screen. Cancel anytime with one click. No risk. Now, if building for myself changed my life, imagine building one for someone who has nothing. In the next video, I show you how $500 gave a homeless mother a real home. It's starting right here.